So, hello, welcome to the latest version of the Poetricity live event, where we are exploring poems that are potentially going to be in the next release of a book we're working on, which is Space for Your Brilliance to Flow. That is a working title, may very well change by the time it becomes a proper book, but that's what we're going for at the moment. And we've obviously been exploring the question of identity. Are we our mind? Are we our body? Or there's something deeper? We talked about awareness, and we also talked about this idea of how do we fight the mind? How do we deal with the mind when it's coming up with stuff that doesn't support or help us? And it's kind of about resetting our relationship with the mind, learning how to be present, and learning how to make the most of the present moment. So the space element of it is a model which talks about S is for seeing your true essence. P is for being present to where the confusion is coming from, which is generally to do with the mind. A is about ascending the confusion itself. And C is about connecting to the present moment. And then the E is about experiencing the present moment as it actually is, not through the filter of our conditioning or how we think it should be. So that's kind of the framework that the book is going to be based on, and a lot of the poetry pieces in it are going to be based on as well. So we've got a few pieces here. Obviously, we're not going to cover them all, but it's always interesting trying to work out where to start. So I'm going to try and experiment today, and I'm going to say, what's top of the mind for you, Claudette? What have you been thinking about most recently? I want to see if we've got a piece that will speak to that, and we'll kick off there.
Well, actually, this morning I woke up and I felt quite down in my spirit. I don't know why.
Okay.
I just felt very, just down. That's
Yeah.
the word I can use, down. And I had a good sleep. Nothing has gone wrong this week. I've had a good week. I'm rested. I'm not in pain or anything like that. But I just felt this down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tried to connect, what have I been doing, or what have I been, if there was something before me, the down feeling came, was it something I was doing or thinking about that could have triggered? So I've been looking for the triggers.
Mm-hmm.
So in the end I couldn't, so I just started talking to myself, tried to get my spirits up and everything,
Mm-hmm.
prayed and everything. And then I ended up going out into the garden. And I like being outside when I feel a bit. So I was outside and I thought, oh, I could do with repairing that my shed window needs repairing. I said I could do with repairing that. I've been looking at that for a little while. Then I started to try and do it. So as I was doing it and everything, it occurred to me I was reading some old WhatsApp messages
Mm-hmm.
from somebody who was very, very close to me,
Mm-hmm.
who I have not been in, I've been in contact, we've been in contact, but we've kind of dropped out of contact.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that the WhatsApp messages, I think is what made me feel
Right.
sad.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
now I know where the sadness has come from, is what do I do with it?
Right. That's good. I love that. So again, I mean, the reason I did this was it's kind of just to demonstrate the beauty of the universe and how everything is connected. So I'm going to put a piece in and going to read it, and then we're going to go from there. So this one says, dark clouds. Dark clouds, they come. I wish that it were not so. But one clue that history left us is that those clouds will finally pass. So I don't let that stop me from going on. I'm going to read it again. Called Dark Clouds. Dark clouds, they come. I wish that it were not so. But one clue that history left us is that those clouds will finally pass. So I don't let that stop me from going on.
Yeah, I think that's the one that speaks to me today, for real.
And what's it saying to you?
I think it's just saying that 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 part of life is that you will get times when things will trigger sadness, but those sadness will pass.
Mm.
And while you're going through the sad, while you're feeling sad, don't resist it, don't fight it. Let
Mm.
it flow, but don't let it stop you from moving on and doing what you need to do.
Mm.
Don't let it cloud the whole of my day. I'm not going to let it cloud the whole of my day.
Mm.
I'm not going to spend my time engaging with it.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. And I can hear a lot of what the ground we've covered as well coming up in that reflection. That
Yeah,
whole idea of the fact that you're experiencing a sense of sadness doesn't mean that you yourself are now destined to be a sad person. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just an
yeah,
experience you're going through, and ultimately it will pass. So I'm hearing
yes.
that. I'm definitely hearing that. And I love what you're saying about not fighting or resisting it. And maybe to just share for those who might not really be familiar with some of the ground we've covered in this regard, what would be the wisdom in not fighting it and resisting it, would you say?
Because the more you engage with it, the more that's where my focus will be,
Hmm.
and therefore I will be thinking about it even more.
Hmm. Yeah. It's ironic in a way because our tendency would be, like you rightfully say, to try and fight it, but actually by fighting it, we are engaging it and giving it more energy and actually give it the power to persist. Um, hmm. I'll go to this next one because I think it speaks to anything else on that actually before I put something
No,
else on
no,
the
no,
thing.
that's it.
Okay, so let's go for this one. This one is called The Great Escape.
Okay.
Running from that pain inside, denying, numbing, and avoiding. It has nowhere to go, trapped inside. Resistance futile, persistence the only game. So many elaborate schemes, like a bad smell, it just won't go away. Its voice silenced, not acknowledged, lacking space to express its call. Don't run from it. The only way is through it. It will finally pass once it is done. The place where peace and freedom are found.
Hmm.
I'm going to read it again. The Great Escape. Running from that pain inside, denying, numbing, and avoiding. It has nowhere to go, trapped inside. Resistance futile, persistence the only game. So many elaborate schemes. Like a bad smell, it just won't go away. His voice silenced, not acknowledged. Lacking space to express it all. Can't run from it. The only way is through it. It will finally pass once it is done. The place where peace and freedom are found.
This is interesting, but this is connected to the very much connected to me to the first one, Dark
Mm.
Clouds.
Yeah, say more.
Well, take if I just use the example of how I was feeling earlier on and everything.
Mm.
When it says running away from the pain inside, there's no point denying. Which when we have unpleasant feelings,
Mm.
there's no point denying them or trying to avoid them. I think we just have to acknowledge how you feel and then and move on.
Mm.
but it can feel like, especially if it's something painful, it can feel like it's something is trapped inside.
Mm.
And it goes, there it goes again. There's that word again, resistance is futile.
Mm.
So, sometimes when we try to resist the way we actually really do feel, or deny that we feel a certain way, it's almost like we are, it doesn't make sense because some things we just have to go through.
Mm.
Sometimes we just have to go through stuff.
Mm.
There's no other way.
Mm.
It's tricky, it's slippery.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's why we're talking about these things.
Yeah.
What class do you go to where you get to learn about this? And yet we all experience these things,
Mhm.
right? Um, Anything else?
I like the bit when it says it will finally pass once it's done.
Mm.
Suggests that
Mm.
there's a time factor
Mm.
in, so we can call it seasons, I suppose, or whatever,
Mm.
that these things do pass if we just allow it to flow
Mm.
rather than try to avoid it or deny.
Mm. Uh, yeah, thanks for that. So something that comes up to me is I think with the way we've been conditioned, where certain things are considered positive and negative emotions, and therefore the simple logic for us is if it's positive, welcome it, embrace it. If it's negative, fight it, resist it, deny it, everything else. But whatever is there showed up for a reason. And if we become more sensitive to understand what is it doing there, and to acknowledge that it's there, not deny that it's there, and let it express itself. So I love what you said at the beginning there, that you had these emotions or feelings come through, and you felt, well, there must be something linked to this. And you kind of thought about it, and then you distracted yourself, you went to do something else. And then all of a sudden, some wisdom came that said, oh, it might be related to something that happened earlier. And so that's acknowledging whatever impact that relationship had or whatever it meant to you about what relationship you had with or anything of that nature. But that's been acknowledged. And once the acknowledgement has taken place, then it's almost like that thing has done its job. It's been acknowledged, it's been recognized, and it has no more reason to be there. So it passes. And that experience is just something that you've had, but is now in the past. And then your basic state of peace and freedom is restored because that it's almost like a wave, that wave is gone. And it's like the idea we have where if there are tears come into your eyes, it's because there's something that needs to be expressed. Now, if you suppress those tears, eventually it will pop somewhere else. There will be whatever you're trying to suppress will eventually pop somewhere else. So I think the invitation here really is to say, ironically, when you're trying to escape, actually seek wisdom as to why you're trying to escape and start practicing the muscle of not escaping, but actually sitting in what that is, knowing that it's just something that's going to pass. It's not you, it's something you are experiencing, and it doesn't define you. And once you do that and give it its space to express itself and go, then your natural state of peace, your natural state of love and joy is restored. That's a much easier path through it than denying or resisting.
Yeah.
Anything else from you on that?
No, I think that's it. I think you summed that up lovely. this poem reminds me of grieving.
Yeah, tell me a bit more about
It just reminds me of all the different times I've been through the process of grieving. That's what it reminds. That's what it reminds me of.
that. Yeah. So how does it support or align with the experience you're having when you're grieving? Or not, as the case.
Well, this it's good to see this poem because I'll probably look at this again because sometimes I find myself in some of the times. Well, it depends on some of the things I've been able to grieve over.
Mm,
I've not always I've not always found it easy to um let it express itself
mm,
and flow through me.
mm,
I've been tied up in the denying and the numbing and the avoiding
mm,
and perhaps that's why sometimes the pain of grieving has stayed with me longer than it perhaps should
uh,
have.
mm. I hear what you're
But
saying.
that's why with this poem, I think what will this will do will help me to see the grieving processes or the changes and things like that. It will get me see it in a different light
Mm, mm. Yeah, I hear.
and not be afraid to allow it to express itself and go.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I love that you shared that. And there's a couple of bits that come to mind actually as you shared that. I think another thing that people tend to think is the only thing you grieve is when someone dies, but you can grieve changes in your life. You can
Yeah,
grieve when things are no longer the way they used to be. Those are all opportunities for grieving what used to be that no longer is.
yeah,
And then, but until you allow that process to play itself out, then you begin to embrace what currently is, which I remember you saying something about you working on a workshop concept around that idea of helping people who've been through similar things that you've been through in terms of the health challenge, and how to then grieve that what used to be and move into this place of now beginning to maximize what is and make
yeah,
the most of that. So that really is. And the other thing that came to me was this idea that actually when you grieve what is, or you allow the grief that is there, because you're not creating these things, they just come up, right? So
yeah,
when you acknowledge that you're there and let them express and come out and pass through, you're also acknowledging that, yes, this was something that mattered. This was something that meant something. And you're acknowledging that, but you're also acknowledging that its time has passed. There's nothing you can do about its time being passed. And really, it's processing that through so that you can see and live in the present moment of what is actually here. Anything else come up on that?
mm. No, I think that's it for me.
Okay. So I'm going to put another one in, which again is a similar theme, but while we're on it, we might as well give it its full kind of treatment, because it's probably not a coincidence that these things are coming up. So this calls out, I'll read it and then we can talk about kind of how it relates to what we've been talking about. This one is called Too Busy. Too busy focusing my energy, fighting what is not okay. Can't focus on what's happening for you. If I make peace with what is, having compassion for me, maybe then I can focus on you. I'll read it again. Too busy. Too busy focusing my energy, fighting what is not okay. Can't focus on what's happening for you. If I make peace with what is, having compassion for me, maybe then I can focus on you.
It's interesting.
How so?
This reminds me, you're hitting the spots today, I'm telling you. This reminds me of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds me of a long relationship I was in, where you focus on fighting what is not okay and spend time focusing on what is not okay, that you forget about the real crux of what a relationship is about. And you can forget, you can even, it's also, you can just lose yourself and lose the person that you are in a relationship with, because the focus is not on either of you. The focus is on fighting what's not right.
I love the context in which you've put that. So if you have to walk that journey again, though, what would you do differently in that context, based on what this is maybe pointing?
I would think there's a place for fighting what's not okay in a relationship. There's a place for it, but not to let it consume the relationship. Not let it be the center and be all, that you forget that there's human beings involved and people's feelings involved.
I love that. I love what you say there. And there's another piece I'm going to bring after this that will kind of speak into that. So I'm not going to go too much into that at the moment, but I love what you said there. There's something about focus, and we'll talk about that. Anything else before I kind of say anything else on this piece?
No, that's more or less it, really, that one.
Okay. So one of the things I wanted to pull out in this is that the concept of fighting what's not okay is an interesting one, simply because, and I think I've got another piece that talks about this, what's not okay has already happened. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So while you want to address it, fighting is not necessarily the most constructive way of addressing it, because it's already happened. And I love something that, was it Maya Angelou? I think it was Maya Angelou who used to say this to, and I think it was Oprah Winfrey who quoted that, something she learned from Maya Angelou, that when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I'm saying this specifically because you brought it into a relationship context. So the idea is, when something happens that's not okay, the first thing to do is not necessarily the fighting of it. It's to actually understand that, what is this person telling me? What is this person showing me? What am I learning about who this person is? Not who I thought they were, but who they actually are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think part of the wisdom we gain from that is the extent to which we want to fight it is the extent to which we're grieving the difference between who we thought they were and who they're proving to actually be. So if we surrendered the fighting and move into the learning mode, we then begin to learn about who. So actually, you're never going to fully learn about someone in a relationship till you're in that relationship with them. because there's such a thing as context. And when you have a context in your courtship, or you have a context in the, and those contexts change, maybe you become a bit more comfortable. Maybe you're not living together and blah, blah, blah. So when all those contexts happen that trigger something else that create different outcomes, yeah, you can be surprised by all means. Oh, I didn't see that coming. Oh, I didn't expect that. Oh, that's interesting. But it's not the fighting, it's the learning. Oh, okay. So now I see when this kind of context and this happens, this is how it affects this person. This is what it triggers in this person. And not just about the other person, it's yourself as well. This is what it triggers in me, because there's two people in a relationship, right? Not
Yeah.
one. Yeah. But again, when you focus on fighting what's not okay in someone else, what we certainly miss is that actually the thing that's not okay for someone else, if we look deep within ourselves, there's parts, a shadow of it in us that we're not okay within ourselves either.
Mm-hmm.
So we begin to fight in other people what actually there are traces of in us that we can't make peace with. And therefore it can't be okay in someone else. And that's that line where it says, if I make peace with what is having compassion for me. So the having compassion for yourself is accepting within yourself that everything that within you that you are not embracing, that you are fighting, to recognize that you are a human being learning and walking the journey. And as you discover and learn, you grow and develop. And it's okay not to be all perfect. And again, we've got another piece about perfection that we might come to. It's okay not to be perfect. And if it's okay for you not to be perfect, what does that make possible for other people?
It's okay for them not to be perfect too.
Hmm. And one of my biggest game changers in any relationship dynamic is that you never change a relationship by trying to change the other person. Because they're mirroring something to you that you need to see that you're not aware of. Learn, see, adjust. Then the relationship will transform. And if in the end the relationship is transformed because you're transformed and you still don't want to be in that relationship, that's fine. But guess what you've done now? You've grown, you've learned, and in your next relationship, you're showing up completely differently. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did you want to say anything else about that?
I suppose there's an element to me that there might be an element of wanting to control something that you can't control.
I love that. Love that. Yeah. And hold that thought, because there's a piece on that and I'm going to put on the table, and then we can explore that a bit further. This one is called Out of Control. Focus on what you love. You only get one at a time. You don't get to choose two. So focus wisely on what love brings you. Never mind those big things, the ones that feel out of control. That is because they really are. Don't waste your precious focus on those. I read it again. Out of control. Focus on what you love. You only get one at a time. You don't get to choose two, so focus wisely on what love brings you. Never mind those big things, the ones that feel out of control. That is because they really are. Don't waste your precious focus on those. What do you hear?
This sounds a bit baffling to me.
Yeah, go on. That's all good. Baffling is good. Which bit baffles and which bit doesn't?
When it says focus on what you love, you only get one at a time. Don't don't get two, don't get to choose two. So focus wisely on what love brings you. I mean, I just find this quite baffling. I'm not sure what to think of this.
Okay. And if you had to take a go at it, what, if anything of it, makes any kind of sense? Any part of it? Or what are you butting up against?
So I don't like, like when he says focus on what you love, to me, that's like focusing on something that I liked. I would say something I like doing or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it comes on the last line, so focus wisely on what love brings you. I don't know. I don't know. I can't see how that line connects with. I can't see that. Then that line stands out to me. I don't know why that's there. Put it that way.
Okay. So the first thing I'm going to put out there is that this is not necessarily meant to be true. Nor is it meant to be right. It's meant to incite thought.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I'm going to put out there. The other thing is that there is something we have as human beings where we believe that we are fully multitasking.
Okay.
Okay. But in reality, when we're focused on something, it actually blinds us to other things. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Because
Okay.
our focus creates something called a filter. So what that means is that when we're, so for example, let's go back to the previous example. When you're focused on what's not right, you have lost sight of those other things that you're now reflecting on about, oh yeah, I know this is not ideal, but actually I shouldn't forget there is a person here who is also growing, who is also learning, who's also new to this relationship. So that's my point, is that you once you focus solely on what's wrong for you, it creates a filter that blocks out the consideration of all those other things and the person on the other side. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. So the invitation then is to say, if you have the opportunity to focus on what's not right and what that generates for you doesn't align with love, then the invitation is to look at that and maybe say, okay, what would love do? How would love deal with this? And then focus on that. So when you hear that, does that provide any kind of clarity or?
Not really. Never mind those big things, the one that feels out of control. That is because they really are. Don't waste your precious time, your precious focus on those. No, this one's really thrown me today.
Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because
I'll probably spend some time looking at that
yeah,
tomorrow or so.
and I invite you to do so, because that's the whole point of poetry, really, is to challenge your thinking. So here's what I'm going to say. If something is challenging your thinking, number one, I have to admire your honesty in that, because the various bias of us is, I want to prove that I'm smart, so I'm going to make something up. Do you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
your honesty to yourself to say, actually, I'm not quite getting this. But also, the other thing I want to put on the table is, if you're butting up against something like this, there's a good chance because you're about to shift your paradigm. Because what's potentially happening is you have a paradigm into which you can't fit what this might be pointing to. So it's a challenge to reevaluate your paradigm. It's like, okay, how would my paradigm need to change for me to make sense of what this is? And so what I'll do is, since that's you're going to go away and have a look at this, I'll just quickly mention one or two more things and then we'll move on. So the idea of understanding and being sensitive to what you can or can't control is an interesting conversation when it comes to focus. So I think the first part we come to is that focus itself is precious, because where you put your focus then excludes other things that you could be focusing on. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
focus is almost like a filter. Once you focus on something specifically, you're at the same time choosing not to focus on other things.
Mm.
And those things are therefore not forefront of your consideration because you're already focused. So as we said, if you're focused on just how this affects you, how this impacts you, and how it wrongs you, or how you're not happy there's that way and whatever, then that focus creates a filter to which you might not see what's happening with the other person, what's happening, what other context there might be that might explain things and things like that. So the only way to then break out of that, when you recognize that the way that you're processing this is actually not allowing you to exist in a state of peace, love, or joy, then the invitation is to say, okay, how can I change focus in a way that I can hear what love will do in this situation, or how love will deal with this situation? So when you then look at that way, then you focus on yourself being love. And like you said in your reflection, actually, love says there's another person in here, there's another person involved, or so on and so forth. And then you choose to look at, okay, what does that mean? What does that bring to the situation? And then the other thing is, say you then go then and say, well, what I'd really like is for this person to change, but you have no control to change someone else. Then the invitation is, okay, if I can't change someone else, what can I change? I can change how I see the situation. I can change how I show up in the situation, or I can choose to change the situation by no longer being in the relationship. So it's kind of, again, acknowledging what you are in control of, acknowledging what is in your power to do, and to step into that and move and act from that place. Does that help?
Mm.
Anything else you want to say about that one?
No.
Okay. I'm going to put another one on the table. And this one, I think, is something you mentioned earlier, and I think it's an interesting one to look at. I call this the greatest illusion, and let's see if it shows itself. There goes an illusion, as rare as unicorns flying. For to those with fair eyes, who seek it of life, that it should be perfect still. For woe betide the pleasure of now, if it shows not up in the way that it was willed. I stumbled upon one greater still, the creature they call perfect, rarer than hen's teeth. It they sought and still they seek, but none can agree on what it is. So the sands of time fade for those who sit and wait, resisting the pleasure of the present. I'm going to read it again, the greatest illusion. There goes an illusion, as rare as unicorns flying. For to those with fair eyes, who seek it of life, that it should be perfect still. For woe betide the pleasure of now, if it shows not up in the way it was willed. I stumbled upon one greater still, the creature they call perfect, rarer than hen's teeth. It they sought and still they seek, but none can agree on what it is. So the sands of time fade, for those who sit and wait, resisting the pleasure of the present.
And with that one, the first thing that came to my mind was chasing perfection.
Yeah, say a bit more.
You know, it's just about chasing perfection to the point where you don't live in the present. You're not in the
Mm,
present anymore because you're always chasing perfection, or you're trying to find perfection in everything.
mm, mm.
And in the end, finding nothing.
I love that. I love what you just said there. In the end, finding nothing. Mm. Anything else?
Not really. It's just chasing perfection is just what's coming through for me.
Mm. So what's been your experience of that? What I mean, I know some people are more inclined than others to be that way. What would you say is your relationship with seeking perfection?
Sometimes I have in the past look at like in my work,
Hmm.
um, seeking perfection in my work, has led me to be like very critical of myself when I don't achieve what in my mind, this is how it should be.
Hmm.
And I try to make, or going over something over and over and doing it over and over again to try and make it better and better when it's already good enough, not knowing when it's good enough and to
Hmm.
stop,
Hmm.
not trusting myself that it's good enough.
Hmm.
And I've done that lot. I've done that in the past with things that I've been involved in, and it leads in the end. It just led me to doubt myself
Hmm.
when there was no reason to doubt myself. But when I was chasing this perfect, trying to make something, I wrote, when I've already done something, and I know it's good, but trying to keep making it better and better. And I suppose that, in a sense, I actually saw people like that. Like I've had friends where, we got great relationships, but I still expect, but if once they did something that to me that it was like, oh, why did they, why didn't they do this? I could be quite critical
Hmm.
because that perfect vision or
Hmm.
that I had of them, once they shatter it,
Hmm.
I found it hard to then see them in another way,
Hmm.
so to speak.
Hmm.
So I've had to learn, unlearn, and learn all those different things.
Yeah, I love that you brought it into a relationship context actually, because yeah, it does have power there. And again, it goes back to some of the things we discussed today, this idea of fighting what is. Like, I expect this person to be this. They have
Yeah,
shown that they're human, and this is the experience that they're having in this moment where they've shown up in this way. But like you say, if you had this idea, this is the perfect way for this person to respond, and they haven't, and your focus is on why haven't they responded the perfect way that they should have, then you're missing out on the focus on what's happening for them. That means that this is the way they've shown up. It's an interesting one. And when you went and talked about I know you flagged the consequence of seeking this perfection is you begin to doubt yourself, which just makes things worse effectively. What other impact was there to you of seeking perfection?
um, but I didn't trust anybody to. Well, in my work, it's like I didn't trust. I wouldn't trust my colleagues to do certain tasks,
Mm,
or I wouldn't delegate certain tasks to certain colleagues because
mm,
I couldn't trust that they would do it to the perfection, this perfect standard I had in my head.
mm.
In other words, that led to me getting to burnout much faster.
Okay.
I wouldn't allow other people to, I didn't trust
Mm,
that they could do it in that, so it would end up in that perfect
mm,
sort of whatever that I was expecting, that I could see.
mm,
And I suppose in some sense, it must have people who may have worked, those people who might have worked with me around those times might have found it find me very difficult to work with
mm,
as well, thinking, you know, I'm, they can't do, they can't do, couldn't get it for the way
mm,
I wanted it to be. I'm telling them this is how it's supposed to be. This is how I want it. And nothing, I didn't look at their efforts. I just wanted it to be so.
mm. Yeah, I love that you've called that out. Again, this is all tying up, isn't it? Because again, it's this focus thing. You're focused on getting it perfect. You don't trust them to get it perfect. And whatever effort they've made, you don't see, because your focus is not on the effort they've made. Your focus is on the perfect that you're seeking. And it's the same perfect by which you judge yourself, by which you doubt yourself, and by which you judge other people, and by which you doubt them. Anything else on this perfection?
Where does it all come from?
Well, it's the way the mind works, right? So, and part of the journey of this whole book, and part of the journey of the pieces we're dealing with, is to try and understand the mind better, so we can have a better relationship with it. Because there's no point fighting it. We just need to understand why it's doing what it's doing, and we need to learn from it so we can relate to it in a way that's more constructive. That is the purpose of this journey. So this is why this is being called out. It's an illusion, because no two perfects are ever the same. So if we both look at the same task, what I will call perfect will be different from what you will call perfect. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the fact that perfect is not one absolute that everybody agrees on shows that the concept of perfect itself is the illusion of the mind. So it's a belief that it made up that there's one way to do something that is perfect, and if anybody falls short of perfect, something is wrong. The irony of it, of course, is filtering out the fact that someone else is perfect of that same thing is completely different. And something you said earlier is interesting. You said, there is a good enough, i.e., it will do the purpose for which is intended. But by seeking an illusory perfection, you keep going over and doing over, and the effect is you doubt yourself and you drive yourself to burnout. Now the question is that a price worth paying for an illusion? But if you're not aware, if you haven't created the space to understand what's happening, you're not aware. You're so caught up and so focused on your drive for perfection that you miss out on the impact it has on your colleagues when you're seeking it and you're judging them by it, the impact it has on yourself when you're seeking it and judging yourself by it. All these focuses are not there. And therefore you ended up, and they end up, and the relationships end up paying the price. And many things that could have been done may never done, and many things that could see the light of day may never see the light of day because they're just not perfect enough. So I promised you I'll tell you what's going on. So the idea of perfect has to do with the mind and how it works. The mind likes to have boxes because it makes it easier for it to work out things very quickly. So its idea of establishing, quote unquote, what's perfect is to say, if we create this box and say, this is what good looks like, or perfect, as using that word, it's easy for me to compare anything against it and know straight away if it meets that standard. However, what it's forgetting is, if the reason for doing something is for it to fulfill a purpose, if that thing is able to fulfill that purpose, then it's good enough to fulfill that purpose. So you release it, let it fulfill that purpose. And if, as it's fulfilling that purpose, you discover that, oh, I see, actually, if I could have done that like this, then that would make it even better. Then next time when you have an iteration of it, you go and improve on that. And that's in what in IT, they call that agile approach to doing things. So it's kind of like, do whatever the best you can do right now, put it to use, try it, test it, and you will learn something about it, and then you can go and improve it. And then use that and see what happens. And then you can go back and improve it, right? So for example, what we're doing now is similar. I could try, sit down, and try and work out what all the greatest poems in a book would be, put it out there, and I could spend the next year trying to work out what are the best pieces to put in, what are the best questions to put in, but I could do all of that. Or I could just put whatever I've got out there and put it to test and let people see, experience it. I can learn from it and then make it better, release it. And then again, I'll get feedback from people and then we'll release the next version of it. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, it's like an approach. I'm going to work on it till it's perfect, which it might never be because perfect never stays still, as you noticed.
Yeah.
Because it might be perfect now until you go and look at it with a different set of eyes. And then all of a sudden, what looked perfect before is no longer perfect. And you can keep doing that so it never gets released. It never serves anybody, never does anything. I call that like keep climbing the mount and another summit beckons. That's how perfection is, seeking perfection. Is that you think you've gotten to the top because the mind is always in constant flow. So even when it tells you this is now perfect, ask it a day later, that same thing it told you was perfect, it's now changed, it's transformed, it sees something else in that moment and flags it as not as perfect. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So ultimately seeing through the illusion and not taking it literally. Like I understand my mind is just looking for this thing called perfect, but I now know because of my learning that there's no such thing as perfect. So the question I need to ask myself now is this good enough for the purpose for which it's required? Let me put it to use and learn from that experience and then improve it if it needs to be. And that's kind of the way to deal with it. But when you're caught in it, sometimes you just don't see that.
Yeah.
And the beauty of this, of course, like you've already called that, is if you're able to take this journey for yourself, when you're in relationship with other people that you're managing or working with or collaborating with, you can allow them to do what's good enough as well and let them learn from it to make it better next time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about that?
No, it's very helpful. Mm.
Okay. I'm going to put the last one in. And I got to be honest, I don't really like this piece, but something tells me it's going to work. So I'm going to use it and see how we go with it. Again, because my mind doesn't like it, doesn't mean it's not good for what it needs to do. So it's a good demonstration of what we're discussing, I suppose.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to read it. It's called I Can Adapt. I can adapt to changing situations because I've not made my mind up what they should be. I'm free to see what comes to me, hear what wisdom it has to give. I sit and listen while it teaches me what the universe seeks to unfold. Then I wonder what next to do that I get from the universe too. So at no point do I tell it how it should be. I let it speak and take the lead. In that moment, I'm wide open, not presumptuous about what I'm to be doing. Once that is clear, I take the next step, all in wonder and amazement at what comes next, trusting with every turn of events what the universe will serve up. Must be that I've learnt to trust. I'm going to read it again, and this time I'm going to take it a bit slower. I can adapt to changing situations because I have not made my mind up what they should be. I am free to see what comes to me, hear what wisdom it has to give. I sit and listen while it teaches me what the universe seeks to unfold. Then I wonder what next to do that I get from the universe too. So at no point do I tell it how it should be. I let it speak and take the lead. In that moment, I am wide open, not presumptuous about what I am to be doing. Once that is clear, I take the next step, all in wonder and amazement at what comes next, trusting with every turn of events what the universe will serve up. Must be that I've learned to trust. What are you hearing?
I just hear trust God. You don't have to be in control. Just let go.
Hmm.
Be still. Be at one in yourself. Be still. Be one at yourself, and let God speak.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's all to do with trust. This
Yeah.
this this one is, and just whatever you got to just be feel comfortable, and just
Hmm.
trust that whatever God wherever God leads you, just
Hmm.
embrace it, so to
Hmm.
speak.
Hmm.
Which this would be a hard thing for somebody who likes control to
Hmm.
to to flow. Somebody who likes control would find this very difficult to do, to
Hmm.
be difficult to be this way.
Hmm. Which is why we've taken the journey we've gone on, because that's to set you up to be more open to this way of being. When you see through the illusion of the other way of being and how it doesn't deliver, it's based on illusions, and you don't control most of the things you're trying to control. And it's worth noting that the session we've just had actually is based on this principle, because I asked you what's happened for you.
Yeah,
What's the chances that what's happened for you, pretty much most of the pieces that we've got in here addresses exactly what happened for you today. What's the chances of that? But that's what you get when you trust that we're never been in control of this stuff. If we allow ourselves to be present and flow with what's in the room, needs can be met.
yeah,
Be a blessing. Things can transform without an ever feeling that we've been in control. We don't need to be in control. We just need to be able to respond to what's present in the moment, which is what we've done today. And I'm going to leave you the final word to say for the fact that this buffet was actually for you. How has it supported you today?
it's good because it's made me reflect. I feel more peaceful now than when I first came
Hmm.
at the beginning of the session.
Hmm.
Um, my mind feels clearer, and I'm
Hmm.
able to I'm able to articulate now
Hmm.
how the processes of what I went through this morning and so forth. But also, there's so many things that came up throughout the poem that's made me made me reflect on other things that's going on in my life. I've
Hmm.
made a lot of notes today,
Hmm.
which I'm gonna go. I wish I will. In fact, I'll spend the rest of the afternoon and this afternoon and go through this again because there's some stuff in there that I need to make sure I practice.
Hmm.
I make it more very practical tools I can get away with. I can use today with
Hmm.
what I've learned,
Hmm.
but it's also given me a better understanding of me.
Hmm. That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Um, well, thank you so much for
Thank you.
yeah, for being so open and so insightful and so reflective. It's made a big difference to the quality of the session, and I'm glad that we've been able to cover something that delivers direct value to yourself today, because obviously the universe had decided this was your day.
Yeah, and he made sure nobody else was on the session.
And that's okay too.
Yeah. So he does. He knows how to meet the needs, doesn't he?
Yeah, it does indeed. If we trust, if we
Yeah.
trust. And that's the journey, learning to trust. The universe has our back.
Well, you know what? When I the first thing I said when I felt the way I felt this morning, I said, God, why am I feeling? I asked him, why am I feeling this way?
Yeah.
Because you know me more than I know myself.
Yeah.
Why am I feeling this way? I don't know. I don't have no reason to feel like this. You know, why am I feeling like this? So he's giving me the answer, doesn't he?
There you go. It can be a bit like that. You get the question first, and then you get the answer later. I'm
Yeah.
about to answer the question, so I'm gonna ask it first, and then you can get it answered. I love
Yeah.
that.
So
All right
so
then.
I got the answers.
Have a beautiful rest of your day.